Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Alhamdulillah. Wassalatu wassalamu ala rasulillah. Assalamu alaikum, brother Arafat. Okay, just making a quick feedback video. Excuse me, for teachers while I'm going through their materials on the lesson. Alhamdulillah, it was a good lesson. It was very good, brother. Like the whole lesson was good. So actually, most of what I'll talk about is more about sharpening some things, as opposed to things that like really need to be worked out or that type of stuff. Really big strengths: the use of visuals on the board, and the ability to bring the visuals out piece by piece by your own use of the board was very strong. Very clear that that aided the kids' ability to learn, and that they have been learning math based on their ability to do the work, their ability to participate in the class, as well as the notes that they were taking themselves and their ability to orientate the notes on the grid and everything. All of that was very good. Keeping them engaged with the questioning and doing the input and outputs. That was also very good. Alhamdulillah. The use of the nonverbals. You did the nonverbals very, very well. The pausing, not letting students get out of attention and redirecting when that was necessary. You held them to high expectations in that way. That was very, very good. Okay, so I'm going to talk a little bit about, in the video here, more about trying to get better, of course. So, we'll focus on where that can happen. So I'm going to talk a little bit about setting them up in the beginning of the class academically. Okay, you did a good job setting them up material-wise, making sure everyone had the materials out, making sure everyone was set to learn, in the seats, all that type of stuff. So behavior and logistics-wise, they were set up well. So just setting them up a little bit better academically, and you didn't do as good at that as you planned for in your lesson plan, and sometimes that happens. So it's there, just need to implement it. And then some improvements with the questioning, some ways to sharpen it, and setting them off to independent work. That was what I had on here. Okay, so beginning of the class here. Okay, let's see when you're beginning here.
So we finished exercise 10.2 yesterday, and we have to continue after that. Yes.
Okay, right here. This is where you're starting the academics. Now, look, I know there is a tendency, because we think about class in terms of what we need to get done. So there is a tendency that teachers will have to want to refer to the exercise that's going to be done, or we're doing this in the book right at the beginning. Now, you will go over that in the beginning, but it's not generally best to make that the very first thing that you talk about. Okay, you want to introduce the topic, or reintroduce it if it's building on what you've taught before, and give the purpose, or re-go over the purpose of why this piece of math is important, why it's important, in civilization, and why it's important Islamically, what they will get out of it, and then why it's important for whatever they're going to do. Okay, and then why it's important for whatever they're going to do. All right?
You're right, Hamza. It's 10.3, the slopes of the linear graph. What the page number, Hamza?
Third.
Can you be loud?
Third.
Page. Sorry, all of you. So now open your textbook, please open your textbook. So you have page number 30. We finished 10.2 where we did with the graphs, the before class in this chapter, and we learned. Okay, I assigned you homework, right? No, I assigned you homework. All right.
Okay, a question I had here, because in the lesson plan you modeled one problem, you did a problem with the measuring the slope as a class, and then they did it independent of the book. Now you have them get the books out right away. You did make some reference to the book of where this is, like these terms are gone over in the gold box in the book. Like you said, things like that. I was wondering, I'm not saying it has to be this way, I was wondering the extent to which it was necessary for them to have the books out before it was their turn to work independently. And the reason I say that is, number one, you illustrated everything very, very well on the board. Even if it was problems from the book, they were able to get it from the board and participate from the board. The books, just in general, a lot of times it's best to have them not have more materials out at the time than they need. sometimes it creates a tendency for that student to, instead of being engaged in the learning, to go ahead. Now, these girls who sit in the back on the right, especially this girl with the glasses, this girl is starting to bother me when I see in the classes, because she's always trying to do this thing of either like, I'm going to work ahead and get done and check out, or like in the literature classes, she's reading a book that is her own book when she should be listening to the teacher. So, and the problem with that, you know, she might be thinking, oh, I can get this, or I know this, or something, I can go ahead. And I think she tried to do that in this class, but then when it came time to do the independent work, she actually had to go ask the girl who sits to her left of what they were doing and how to do it and this type of stuff. And then after that, something else went on with the girl who kept putting her head down that I'll get into here in a moment. So that's that. You can mitigate that tendency a little bit of, you know, some students have that, and you have certainly ones in the class who, I'm going to check out from what you're saying because I'm just going to go ahead and get it done in the book, and then I'm done. And when you lead with talking about we got to get this exercise in the book done, it makes it like the whole class is about doing that exercise and not so much about the value of learning how to measure slope and the importance that comes with that. So you want to start it off with that purpose. Now, the other thing you want to do, let me see here.
Yeah, so I'll check at the end of the class. If time permits, I'll check that point.
Here's some of the homework
And I
here.
told you that the 3 lines what we were drawing. Remember, I draw the 3 lines, one with red, black, green. Sorry, 4 lines. There were 4 lines. This blue, and all with green.
Good pausing, very good pausing right there. You did really good with the pausing and the redirection when kids were off task and stuff. One thing, refinement, or I say an improvement, I had that, and something that I could show you in the video. Something the video will reveal. The only times you didn't do that where you should have was where these two guys to the left here were whispering in the back a little bit, and you didn't realize it, which is fine because sometimes you don't realize it, but just be aware that that is going on, especially when you turn to the board to write something. So not a bad idea to, when you turn to the board to write something, to say, look at what I'm writing here. You need to pay attention to this or that type of thing. You did do it one time where you went to the board and then you turned before writing, and that got them like to redirect. You know, just try to, you can just do that more. Just continue to do that more to hold them to high accountability there. But now here, okay, you're recalling the background knowledge they need from what they learned previously with the different lines.
Right? So that graph I'll check at the end of the class if time permits, or I'll check it tomorrow if any other homework.
Talking about the homework.
But without wasting the time, we'll go ahead with 10.3 is slopes of linear.
Okay, now you're getting into the academic concept.
So before starting with the topic to the slopes directly, in the graphs, when we have drawn the graphs, we discuss about this one linear. Anyone can say what is linear?
Okay, now you do a good job teaching the academic concept. You do a very good job of that. Just before you get to this point, or before.
Raise the hand if you know the answer. Linear. Raise the hand if you know the answer.
Okay, before getting to you know what the term means or this type of stuff, because from here you go into getting into how to teach the slope measurement. Okay, you know, in the beginning of the class, okay, class, today we're learning about how to measure slope. Measuring slope is important because it is something that architects, it is something that engineers, it is something that anyone who designs anything uses in the world. Let me give you an example. If I'm making a soccer field, if I have slope in that, I'm going to, you know, and now you got into the soccer example later. When you asked them for an example of a slope line, and it took 2 minutes to get an answer for that question, and it just ended up you being given the question. So I'm going to break that down a little bit of how to do that a little better. But that should have been brought here in the beginning, and you should have just brought it more directly, like, you know, and you just say quickly like I just did. Okay, it's an important thing we use for all these different things. Let me give you an example. Okay, when I have a bridge on a road and that road connects to a road that's lower, if I have to know how to measure a slope in that in order to design that correctly. Who else can give me an example of when I use of a slope that exists in the real world? Now, you asked a question similar to that later on in the middle of teaching the academic concept. Okay, this purpose thing is better done before. Where does that take place?
One word I can take like tilt. Anyone can say? Can someone give an example?
Now, Yusuf had just defined accurately what a slope is here, okay?
What a slope looks like.
Okay, now this question, the way you asked it was a little confusing. I was confused by the question when you asked it because you said, can anyone give an example of what a slope looks like? So I thought you meant, like my first thought when you asked this was he could ask them to indicate it non-verbally because he could show a slope like this. And a slope is like this. It's not like that. It's not like that. That's what I thought you were getting at. So you could have, and you had it in the lesson plan, you could have asked here like a slope, example of the slope in the real world, and give your own example with it. That would have gotten them producing examples of it. Instead, it kind of dithers for 2 minutes. Yusuf tries to answer with the definition with not an example. The girl to the right here who's putting her head down, she just reads the definition from the book, and you say to her, I don't want the definition from the book, I want an example. So there's kind of 2 minutes in there that was lost. So there's no, if you ask a question, sometimes you ask a question and it's not quite clear to the kids what you're saying. And if you wait 5-10 seconds and you don't have a hand raised or you don't have an example produced, it's okay. And especially a question like this where there's multiple answers that can be given, just go ahead and give your own example. That will trigger to them more concretely what you're talking about. They'll be able to give it then. That could have moved it along well. And this whole part, it should have been more at the beginning of the class before you got into the academics because it connects to purpose. Now, the other thing to do before you start teaching the concept is just an outlay of what is going to happen in the class. 1, 2, 3. This is why I have that expectations section on the lesson plan. You go over. First, I'm going to teach you about the slope concept. Then I'm going to show you how to measure the slope on a triangle. Then we're going to measure a slope on a triangle together, and then you're going to do it by yourself in your book, okay? And you go through the expectations of those 3 things. When I'm teaching you about the concept, you need to be watching me up here with your eyes up here and taking notes. When I ask you a question during that, you need to raise your hand or you need to all respond at the same time, depending on how I ask. When we do it together, we'll still do it on the board, but you guys need to guide me through it instead of me showing you everything. And when we do it independently, you guys have to do it all by yourself silently at your desks, and that is going to tell me whether or not you've learned it, all right? Now, when you give that outlay, number 1, it helps create expectations in them for what is going to happen. That helps keep them, and they were attentive, but that helps keep their attention better. It reduces anxiety in some kids because they know what's going to happen next. At this age, it can reduce boredom in kids because they anticipate that something is coming. When you go through the 1, 2, 3 of what's going to happen, I'm going to teach them, we're going to do this together, and then you're going to do it independently, a little bit of what it's going to look like. That puts pressure on the kids to know that if I don't learn this, I'm not going to be able to do it when I have to do it independently, okay? Which is a very, very important piece because you can use that to remind them to participate and to remind them to be paying attention, and it puts more pressure on them. Now, for this, I'm going to skip. Now, first of all, with this directions of, okay, what do you need to be doing? You need to be looking, like you give the expectations with each phase. You did a lot on the board, you were doing stuff, and you had like 3 kids taking notes for most of it. Then at 12, up here, about 12, almost 13 minutes into it, okay?
What is that? I want you to write down this one, all of you. Write down this one.
Okay, this is where you're showing the rise over run formula. Here, you say to them, I want you to write this one down, all of you, this one. After this point, you have all the kids writing, not just this formula, but everything that you have going after. And actually, the participation goes up a lot in the class during the instruction and during the guided practice after you do this. Because here, you gave the explicit directions that everyone is to write it. And actually, a lot of the kids, they not only wrote the formula at this, but they caught up with writing everything else that you had put on the board at this point too. Okay, so if you had given the expectation that while you're teaching that they're supposed to be taking notes ahead of time, you would have had that quality of participation for the 10 minutes before this of everybody. where they are writing. And from here, like through it until they get to independent practice, the participation is very good because every kid is either interacting with it by writing or the answering of questions. And you have like the different modalities of learning going on where they're seeing things visually on the board, they're hearing the instruction from you, they're participating with questioning, and they're writing on the board. So if you just set that expectation in the beginning, and the teaching will be better. And in some of those other classes, like in the afternoon where the kids are a little more squirrely and all that type of stuff, if you doing that in the beginning, setting that expectation that they're writing what you're putting on the board, that will keep them settled better because they'll be less inclined to side talk and that type of stuff. And also too, when you set that expectation to write at the beginning, the same way you held them to account with listening during the pausing, you can also do that with the writing once you've set the expectation for in the beginning. Okay, so that's just a reminder. Okay, because it was good when you had them doing this, but just do this earlier. Do that instruction to do the writing earlier. Okay, now and also here too, you get more participation with the questioning even after you do this because the kids start being more engaged because they're all writing, as you can see them here. We had a part here.
Related with Y or X. Okay, this question is for the class.
Okay, no, this is good. Okay, and telling them explicitly, I want you to respond. I thought you could have done more choral response in the class. Okay.
Vertical is related with X or what? Y, very good. Yes, Yusuf. I said for the class, you can.
Okay, good. And Yusuf, he's always raising his hand. This was good. You don't want to over-rely on Yusuf to participate. So this was good to make the whole class do it.
It's for Y, right? Horizontal for X. Good. So vertical chain, I'm saying with.
Okay, now that, all right, so you got the one thing. You told me I want the whole class, the one question, just like one kid responded. Then the second one, horizontals for X, and a lot more kids did it. So you saw it improving from the first to the second question after you gave the instructions for the whole class to do it. What you could have done here is just redo those two questions again for the sake of getting the choral response better. And there was another time where you said, okay, I said whole response. I want to hear everybody. You do that again later too. And when you prompted for it, it improved. So, you had one kid do it, then you had a handful of kids do it the second time. If you had said, let's redo those questions, I want to hear everyone responding, okay? Horizontal is X, vertical is Y, very good. And and even though it's repeating the same question, no problem with it. Because repeating it will get more kids participating. And again, I think during the instruction, like you did a lot of questioning, which is good. You did a lot of taking of hands raising. Continue to cue. Okay, I want the whole class this time to respond. When you want choral response, use the choral response more. And I think as you're doing the choral response, you'll start to feel more comfortable when you want to okay, so look, in general, these were simple questions that they should know. Okay, horizontal is X, vertical is Y. And those things are always coming up when you're doing the instruction, having to recall previous learning, and you have a good feel for where their previous learning is at. So those simple things, one-word responses, that type of stuff, you can always do choral response as a way to keep kids engaged when you're doing that with the instruction. And if they don't all participate to the liking, redo the question till 100% do it. And the more you habituate them to doing that, the more they will do it. Now, there's some questions where maybe you're going to ask it and it requires a little deeper explanation, but it's still recalling information that you learned before. And so those questions, you don't want a choral response because it takes a longer answer. Now, it's fine to do hand raising. As you do more choral responses and there's more kids actively engaging, you're going to have the kids who raise their hand and answer those questions that require deeper explanation. Yusuf is obviously one of those kids. There's a couple other kids who are very willing. But as you're doing more choral response, you'll feel more comfortable asking those questions and doing some cold calling. So like the girl who puts her head down all the time, or this guy with the curly hair back in the left. Sometimes they're checking out a little bit. Cold calling them to recall a question, that can be a way to keep them engaged along the way, and like you did a good job stopping the girl, telling her to put her head up. but sometimes those can be tactics that are less that are more directly related to the learning of the academics to get them to make sure they're paying attention when you're teaching. Okay. Now let's move ahead to when we transition to independent practice. All right. Now, again, this relates to exit directions. Okay, exit directions mean directions that you give the kids when you set them off to independent work, and making sure at the beginning of the class you let them know what you let them know what's going to happen in the class, and you let them know what the accountability piece is for them. Okay, and the accountability piece is usually the independent practice, and you had independent practice planned in this class. And then there's larger ones. Okay, the accountability piece is the test we're going to take, whatever. And you use that piece to reiterate why kids need to pay attention when they put their heads down or whatever. Because look, you need to know this, because when you do this independently, you're not going to be able to do it if you haven't learned it. Okay. Now let's see here.
Points here Q and R as 3, -1, 1, 2. We have taken x1 and y1, and this one we have taken like x2 and y2, and the substituted values of y2 and x2s, and x2 and x1, and then I got this one. So now you are doing slope of PR. Slope of PR. Do slope of PR. Yeah. To remind you all, some students might be asking individual help, and I'm moving you around for individual help. I don't want anyone to talk on my back. So you are doing slope of PR. Again, I'll just say to people who are not listening, we've found out already slope of PQ, and we found out already slope of QR. You need to find the slope of PR. So you take the points P and R, you write x1, y1, and x2, y2, you substitute the slope formula and get the slope equation. Yes, you do.
Okay, now you did a good job saying I don't want anyone to talk. Then you went to an academic concept. So when they got this, they're set off on the work now. The behavior expectations weren't the last thing you left them with. Okay, that it's better to do that if you want them to stick to not talking. Whatever the behavior expectations for working independently, write it on the board. I know there's not a lot of room here, but you could. There's a way I can move in here. Even if you just write silence up on the board here, and you write it up in a different color in capital letters, and as you write it, that's when you're reiterating the expectations. It's very helpful. And look, something I want you to do, and I'm asking other teachers to do, when you put them off on independent work, don't go to helping kids right away and to circulating right away. For a few reasons. Now, number one here, you taught the academics well enough that they should have it. And you have it illustrated. You have everything that they need illustrated on the board. Okay? Part of the reason why I don't want teachers to be jumping right into helping the kids right away individually when you go to independent practice is we want them to do it independently. So some kids, they'll get into the habit like, oh, even when we go to working independently, if I ask my little question, I'm going to get help. Instead of doing the intellectual work myself to get going. It's there for them. So what you want to do more is you have the academic preparation visuals good for them to do the independent work. It's all set up. Beautiful. You add the behavior expectations to the board. Okay, I want it to be silence, working independently. Raise your hand if you have any questions, okay? And you stand at the front of the room. You can fold your arms or do this and say, you may begin. And then just stand at the front of the room. You can even tell the kids explicitly, if they ask a question, I'm not taking any questions. I'm not moving around. I'm not helping anyone for 5 minutes. Everyone needs to get started. Okay? You need to get started independently and just stick to that. Because otherwise you'll have some kids who they get used to, oh, that teacher's always going to come help me, and they'll abandon doing the intellectual work themselves. Now, the other reason why it's important to monitor the whole class and make sure everyone is working independently is, as this goes on here, you can actually already see this girl in the right who was putting her head down. I forget her name. She's trying to look over at the girl in the glasses because she doesn't know how to do it, and she's trying to get that girl's answers. And even the girl in the glasses, who I said, she's kind of bothering me. Like, she thinks she's so smart. She's actually turning to that girl to her left, and that girl's explaining to her how to do it because she wasn't fully paying attention either. Had the accountability piece been reiterated to these two girls at the beginning of the class, had it been stated that you're going to have to do this independently without any help, and had that been reiterated when necessary, they would have had more pressure to actually grasp the learning themselves. Because what they do here now during the independent work is they resort to self-assisting to get the work done as opposed to really learn it. And what I did here when this was going on, I turned the camera. You can see her doing it, but watch this girl in the hoodie right here. Okay. This girl, she thinks she's being really clever, like acting like, oh, I'm done, I'm sitting politely. It'll move here from the screen. She's put her book right there. Okay, you see, she's put her notebook right here with what needs to be written, and you see this girl look and write because all she's doing is copying what this girl did. Meanwhile, because you're occupied helping these kids who should not need help. They don't need the help here. You taught it well enough at this point. Sometimes our kids, they have this thing like they know how to do it, but they want this like confirmation that it's right from the teacher before they go on. And we got to start, I'll talk about this more in the next PD too. Like, we got to start teaching that out of them and refusing to help them at the beginning of the independent work is key to this, to make sure every kid gets going. And you can't do that unless you're supervising everyone from the front of the room, basically. Because this girl here, you'd have to be, when you see that working independently, you either take a step towards her, or, you know, you give a little snap, or you say their name. You need to be working independently. You're not helping anyone. That whole thing, okay? You see what she's doing? Look, right. Look, right. And this girl, like, oh, she's noticing. I mean, she's conscious of whether or not I'm noticing because they're not doing what they're supposed to be doing here. And now she's looking at the camera over here. So, now again, she's, okay, I'm finished. She swipes it over to her. Okay, so we want to avoid this stuff, okay? This is part of holding the kids to really high accountability. So this is, okay, like you told them you want them to be silent. You do have some kids talking here after you taught them. You know, but emphasizing the importance of they have to do the work independently and then holding them to account to it. You can only do that if you're supervising the whole class, okay? But anyway, brother, Jazakallah khair. You did a good job. These are all enhancements to things that you're already doing well. So I was very pleased with the lesson. I ask Allah to bless you. Anything good that I said comes from Allah. Anything wrong that I said comes from my own deficiencies. And inshallah, we'll schedule time to meet.